Hello there, and to an introduction to SpeakerMix Pro by Celestion. Let me just mute my YouTube thing, which has just got a 15-second delay. My name's Ken Weller, and I'm the marketing manager for Celestion. I actually know very little about marketing, but I'm a complete speaker nerd and somehow managed to convince Celestion to give me a job doing marketing, which still amazes me. Doing the main product presentation will be Joe Elsom. Joe's an engineer who's been with us for a little while, although he's still very young. He actually did his internship at Celestion while studying. What was your degree in, Joe?
Audio engineering.
Audio engineering. There you go. And but he picked up his first guitar at 11 and hasn't put it down since. And managed to get a job in a recording studio when he was 15 years old, and has been stuck in this audio world with the rest of us ever since. So we're going to take you through a kind of guided tour of SpeakerMix Pro. We'll take you through some of its functionality and what it's all about, and we'll talk a little bit about DSRs, and we will do a short audio demo, but just a word about that. Obviously, we're streaming here, and we've got all sorts of bits of software piled on top of one another so we can do a live stream. And so please don't take any quality indications from the audio in this stream. And we will take questions. I believe a colleague of mine, John, is going to be answering some questions on the live text chat. And if you want to put some questions there that you want asked live, should be able to do that as well. So we'll do that. We'll see how we go, and we'll do that either as we go or at the end, depending on the quantity of questions that we have. So SpeakerMix Pro is a 6-channel audio mixer for guitar tone, digital guitar tone. So there's lots of plugins out there that do amps and all sorts of other things, but very few that really focus properly on loudspeakers, guitar tone for loudspeakers. And obviously that's very much Celestion's world. So this is a new product for us and our first ever bit of software, which we're very proud of as we continue to kill all the various bugs that pop up from time to time. But it's a new piece, forgive us for that. But it's also got some very cool features on it, and some very cool features which have a significant advancement in the audio quality that you get from digital to guitar tone. So these are our dynamic speaker responses, but I'll let Joe say some more about that. So over to you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, SpeakerMix Pro, probably the best place to start. As Ken mentioned, 6-channel mixing plugin. The entire concept is designed around mixing guitar tone and guitar speaker tone, guitar cabinets, different microphones. It's what it's dedicated to. And with that, all the stereo processing, EQ, everything you need in one place to mix guitar tone. It's not anything more than that. It's not anything less than that. It's dedicated. It's specific, as it should be. As Celestion plugin, it's dedicated to the guitar tone. So, a few interesting features. We've obviously got Celestion's new DSR technology, dynamic speaker responses, which are a next generation in digital guitar tone, which it begins to introduce the real dynamic harmonic feel as you play that you would get from a from a real guitar speaker, and that's all packaged in SpeakerMix Pro with the 6 channels. So you can mix between many different cabinets in different rooms, or load your own impulse responses if you prefer, because most people listening have probably got a library of impulse responses that they really like the sound of. And there's something novel with the impulse responses as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So if we start off with DSRs, which are Celestion's new advancement in the technology, it stands for dynamic speaker response. And the clue's in the name, really. It's dynamic. Dynamic in the context of it's continuously dynamic and responds to the player's playing level, generating different harmonics relative to that playing level, and also the driving power, because if you drive a speaker harder, you get a different harmonic response. So if we take a step back to the concept of the conception of DSRs and think about real guitar speakers and the way they work, at the core, you're driving current for an amp, whatever amp it is, into this complex device that's taking electrical energy, converting it into mechanical energy, and then into acoustic energy. And all three of those can have a number of non-linearities that affect the tone. And it's all a relative play of distortion from all these different components in both directions, from the amplifier and the acoustic transmission. And it's this complex web of harmonics and distortions generated as you're playing, which are always relative to the players playing and the driving power. So it's totally dynamic. It's a continuous moving, evolving system. That's what sort of manifests as feel. It's what connects the player to the speaker to the amp, and you can think of it as kind of a loop of you're hitting the guitar strings. It's amplified by the amplifier. It's radiated by the speaker, and then back to you, and it's through the wood of the guitar, and into your ears and the body and so on. And it's that connection of feel that really gets you in the moment and playing harder into the speakers. And also the tone of the speakers, of course, because the harmonics change the frequency response. So what we've done with the DSRs is bring that real analog dynamic feel of the harmonic response of real loudspeakers into the digital domain. And we emerge with these new responses, dynamic speaker responses, which are constructed from all manner of measurements of systems to produce these dynamic responses.
Perhaps you could show us the interface, Joe.
Yeah, so if I jump over to the interface and we can sort of talk through some of the novel features as we go. So I'll just share my screen. So this is the plugin. First of all, there's a lot of dials, a lot of knobs and everything, but we'll go through it all step by step. So we've got our 6 mixer channels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I could load impulse responses or DSRs onto each of these channels. The DSRs have been measured and constructed for their true dynamic response by Celestion, but any user-loaded impulse response tunes a dynamic model in the background when you load it into your system. So it's a completely convolution-free system for both DSRs and user impulse responses, which actually means the any user impulse responses that you load have a dynamic element. It's not quite as sophisticated as the DSR because it's generalized, but they do have a dynamic element, and when you play them harder, they do change, and it's a subtlety of the feel that gives it more life. So it brings turns a new page on the impulse responses that we already have and already exist and people already love. So the DSRs themselves, when you load a DSR onto a channel, for example, right now you can see in the top right hand corner of the plugin, I've got a G12M greenback in a 2x12 open back closed back cabinet. Sorry, in this case with an SM57. You can see the information there as I hover over, and at the base of the channel. The DSRs, the way they're constructed is to remove all. There's no interpolation or convolution because of the dynamic model system, which means I can move this. I can snap this mic position through our Celestion's tried and tested lineup of thin, bright, balanced, fat, dark, and dark 2, which you'll find in the Celestion impulse response packs on Celestion Plus. But here we're not interpolating anything. We're not taking multiple responses and finding a interpolated response between them. We're actually morphing the model in the background. So we're morphing the DSR, and that means I can drag through these mic positions and find places in between the positions we already offer as WAV file impulse responses in a dynamic way. Now this is essentially equivalent to moving a microphone on the cabinet, but we're not giving a million different options where you could spend 12 hours moving the mic and still not find the sound you really like. This is known sounds that already sound great where they are, and it's the subtlety of the movement through these sounds that give you something more and give you something extra. Once you've set your mic position, we can have a look at the input channel on the left hand side, the dark grey channel. Z curve we'll get to in a little bit, but we'll start with the input fader, which is it's a little bit of a dark horse. It's not so obvious, but the input fader actually drives the DSRs with more power the higher it is. So as I turn this up, I'm driving more power into the DSR, which is changing the subtly changing the harmonic response. And equally, if I drop it down to minus infinity, we're effectively driving it with less power. And this is between a scale of 1 watt to the maximum power of the speaker. So this G12M greenback, I can drive up to 25 watts when I'm driving it hard. Equally, if I have on channel 2 a vintage 30, I can drive it up to 60 watts. And those two working in parallel, say on channel 1 and channel 2, I've got 25 watts on channel 1 and 60 watts on channel 2, and they've got their own dynamic response that is the mixed together at the output. So it's like having 2 amps driving 2 cabinets, 2 speakers that are dynamic and possibly in the same live room or a different one. So we have a nice feature on the left-hand side, which is just a sort of stereo processing feature, is this delay button, and you can set the delay in milliseconds. This at the moment is set to duplicate left onto right, or your mono channel onto a left-right pair with one side slightly delayed. I can flick between some options, left to right, right to left, or some widening algorithms. This is great for really wide, chunky, full, rich, like rhythm tones, for example, where you want some real stereo width to fill out mixes. So that's a nice feature, and you can go down to 15 milliseconds, and essentially it's decorrelating left and right, so we have some stereo width. The Z curve, or Z curve if you're in the US, is something quite novel in the digital guitar tone world. Each DSR, and in fact a user IR that's tuned into the dynamic responses internally, has its own electrical impedance, as a real loudspeaker does. And that electrical impedance is complex with frequency, and it's dynamic, and it changes and evolves as you play harder or softer. That's then modified by the speaker itself. Each speaker is slightly different flavor of tone, and the cabinet it's in, because we have different acoustic properties that change the way that impedance manifests. That is all connected to an amplifier in the real world. So we would have the output stage of an amplifier, which has its own output impedance, and the input of a guitar cabinet with speakers in it, depending on the speakers. And the connection between the two is physical. They know of each other. They are aware of each other. And electrically, there's lots of complex things going back and forward that change the way the amplifier responds to the speaker and the way the speaker responds to the amplifier. And that's a really complex manifestation of the feel, because it very much depends on your combination of amp and speaker. So what we've done is built the output impedance model of the amplifier into SpeakerMix Pro. And this is not an amplifier model itself. You can put any amplifier model in front of this, or in fact a real amp into a resistive load. And what this is doing is presenting a load to the DSRs that you can tune. So on the left-hand side of the dial, I can have it off, and then it's equivalent to no coupling. Or I can, on the left-hand side of the dial, I'm in the sort of low gain amp, high output impedance territory. And then as I move into the right-hand side of the dial, towards the max of the Z curve or Z curve, I'm in high gain amp territory. And this creates a slight underdamping of the low end around FS of the resonance of the speaker, and a slight scoop in the mids, and then a little bit of sort of shine or shimmer at the top end. So that's when you're getting to like the really heavy metal or gent sounds. The kind of chug thing you get with 7 strings and or detuning. So that, but because the DSRs have their own input impedance, that's different for every speaker. So each speaker I connect to it has its own coupling. And that's also true for any user IRs. Any impulse response you load in is tuned into a dynamic model, and it builds an electrical input impedance for that dynamic model, which is generalized and based on the responses that's provided. So you can use your user IRs with Z curve and get a true feel of amp coupling to your impulse response, whatever the impulse response is. You could go down the route of matching your amp model to the Z curve and having a complete system that's very faithful to the real thing. to the real analog connection between amps and speakers, or you could go really wild with it and have a very low gain amp model with a high gain output impedance with the Z curve, and it just opens up more room for different tones. When we get onto the mixer channels themselves, we have a parametric EQ section, which I can open here and I can activate with the small power button. A number of different EQ nodes that I can double click to activate and boost, cut, and affect Q. And then we have a few features like a low shelf, high shelf, a low pass and high pass that I can move in frequency, and then a tilt function, which is quite useful for guitar tone, which allows us to put a 6 dB tilt on the entire response. So if you really like your tone, but you just want it to be a little bit darker, you can just add a little bit of tilt, or a little bit brighter and less low end, you tilt in the other direction. Every single channel has its own EQ if you want it. The room has an EQ and the master has an EQ. So if you want to EQ every single channel as if you would EQing with other plugins on each of your guitar tracks, or maybe on a desk, that introduces some small phase shifts at different frequencies, so you get that same effect of mixing different mics together. Or if you don't want to do that and you want to have each DSR as its own, as its sort of raw tone, and then do the EQ on the master, you can do. Each mixer channel has a room send, which is just obvious. You turn the room send knob from nothing to 0, which is the same level as the pre-fader of the channel. On the room section, I can set this to route to the bus, which is our dark grey room channel on the right hand side, where we have pre-delay width and the level that's mixed back into the output, and a selection of microphones, or you can load your own room response. Sorry, that's just off the screen. If I slide up a little bit, there we go. So we've got a number of mics, U67, Apollo, Sontronics, the Coles STC 4033, and the TLM 107s, which are already in the Celestion rooms in the IR packs. And then the user IR is whatever's loaded on the load IR function. So if you've got a particular room you like the sound of, or maybe you work in a studio and you've measured your own room, you can chuck that in there and you can mix things into the room bus. Equally, if you want to, as I mentioned, we've got Celestion have already got rooms in our IR packs. You can use the SpeakerMix excited room, which is the same room as we've measured with the microphones in our local studio in Suffolk. But in this case, it's actually excited by the speaker and cabinet combination. So here I've got a G12M greenback in a 2x12 closed. The speaker excited room is driven by that cabinet, which affects, it changes the acoustic coupling to the room. So if I have an open back, I've got like a dipole or a monopole in a closed back, which changes the way it couples to the room. So you get slightly different tones. So there's lots of different flavors in the room mixing. Equally, I can load any user impulse response of a room onto each channel. So I could, in theory, have 6 different DSRs or user IRs with 6 different rooms all mixed together with their own EQ, and then at the master, and then Z curve and so on. So there's a huge number of possible combinations you can start to explore with those sort of options. Then we have the usual suspects for a mixer channel: pan, the level control itself, which doesn't affect the dynamic tone. It's just the mixing, the mix level into the output, and then mute solo. And then from the text at the base of the channel, or the clicking on the rear of the speaker, I can go into the selection menu. And this is where you actually choose your DSR. So here we've got all the Celestion DSRs that are currently on offer on Celestion Plus. We've got some the favorites, blue and down here we've got the vintage 30 and G12 greenback. So I can select my speaker. I've got a number of different cabinets. These are the same lineup of cabinets as the Celestion impulse responses. 1x12 open and closed, 2x12 open and closed, and a 4x12. So vintage 30 most likely go for 4x12. And then our 3 microphones. a lot of people would have noticed if on an open back, I have my rear SM57 rear. If I want to mix that in, with the rear, you don't have the mic slider because it's only ever in one position. But with the mics on the front of the cone, we have the SM57 Royal 121 and the Sennheiser MD421, which is the same lineup we have in our impulse responses. So I can click between these microphones and pick whichever one I want. I can audition these. Can audition these in real time. So in fact, if I hit play on some audio. I can audition those in real time, and once I've decided on the mic I fancy, or the cabinet or speaker I fancy, I can just close the menu from the close tab in the top right hand corner. We've also got at release of SpeakerMix Pro 3 of our bass speakers available: Pulse 12, Pulse 10, and 15 in a 1x12 ported with MD421, the AKG D112 Neumann U47 FET, and the KM8084 on the HF, which is really nice to mix in a little bit more sort of shimmer on the top of bass guitars to get some string, or maybe you've got a sort of dirty sounding out. The HF KM84 works in the same way as the Room. You can't move the mic slider because it's just in one position. So 2 options with the Pulse 10, a 2x10 ported or a 4x10 closed. Same mics, and then the Pulse 15, and then the Pulse 15 in a 1x15. So if we jump back to our, let's go for a blue 2x12 open, because that's a classic combination, and then we'll chuck a SM57 on.
So Joe, you can save these as presets. That's right, isn't it? And we have a question from a friend of ours in Sicily, who said, do you think you guys will be offering whole presets in the near future? And if you think there will be some for other instruments, for example, electric piano, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Historically, guitar speakers have been used for all sorts. Before bass speakers were a thing, 55 hertz greenbacks were used for bass, and keyboards, electric keyboards, Rhodes keyboards, Hammond, that sort of thing, often amplified via guitar speakers. So absolutely, and whether they're Celestion presets, and we'll mix them and get a really sweet tone and share them with you, or a preset you can save in the bottom right. Once you've set your mix, you can save that in the bottom right hand side of the on the master section of the plugin. Once you've saved the preset, you can browse them in the presets menu up here, which gives you some options. In that presets menu, you can create subfolders in the Celestion directory when you install it, so you can group them together into whatever subfolders you prefer and save as many as you want, and call them in and out, different mixes for sessions, for example. So we've got our blue. We can move our mic position. A new feature in an upcoming release. This is actually a sort of sneak preview of a pre-release you're seeing now. We've added a copy and paste channel function. So once I've set my mix on channel 1, for example, I can copy that and I can put it onto channel 2. And I've got the same DSR or user IR on the next channel, which is a really nice, quick and easy way to build mixes, especially on the same channel. For example, if I want to get the same tone as mixing one cabinet with multiple microphones, I can copy that across, jump to the next channel, maybe move the microphone a bit, and I've now got my 2x12 blue open back with a 57 in a darker position, like I've got two 57s. Or I can jump into the selection menu again and maybe put a Royer on for a slightly richer, more neutral sound, less targeted to sort of the upper mids. And maybe I'll make that a little bit brighter and unmute it and then mix it down a little bit. Just revisiting the Room channel, pre-delay. It's quite self-explanatory. delays the front of the impulse of the room, so you can effectively set it back into the space as if you've moved your room mic away from the cabinet, or you can move your room mic very close to the cabinet if you'd like to, with a effectively zero pre-delay. Our rooms are all timer aligned, so they're set to those pre-delays, and you get everything's quite uniform. So if you're changing between different microphones, it doesn't move forward or back in time. So you can quickly switch between the microphones, say the calls. Width is just standard mid-side processing. You can bring the room right down to mono, or you can make it super wide and decorrelated. I usually have it around the middle, quite a natural room sound. On the master section, we've got obviously 2 faders. You can click the drop-down menu to set different metering modes, peak, RMS, and VU on the input and output. A mix to mono button, which is more of a sort of mix auditioning tool, really, which mixes the output, the stereo output, because SpeakerMix Pro is really at heart a stereo plugin for stereo mixing. But this mixes it all down into mono. So if you're working on mixes where you need to be sure that your guitar tone, if it's super wide, that you can still hear it. Say if it's a radio mix and might be played back in mono or something. That allows you to check. So if you mix to mono and there's nothing really, then it's time to revisit some of your stereo processing to make sure that everything's in place. The width control on the master is the master width. So we can take a very wide mix. Maybe I've panned these hard left and right, and we can bring that entire mix, maybe with lots of width on the room, back into the center. So after you've set your complete mix of maybe many DSRs, different rooms, you can then bring it right into the middle, or you can make it much wider if you want it much wider, maybe for really washed out guitars that are sort of acting like pads in the background and sort of.
So Joe, we've got about 3 minutes to go. So if you could
Really?
just you've got like 2 minutes to just wind up with some couple of conclusions, perhaps.
Yes, that's gone quickly. So conclusion: DSRs, it's returning the feel of the dynamic response of guitar speakers to the digital world, and also gives you the electrical coupling to the output of the amplifier. So we're reconnecting the guitar responses, guitar cabinet responses to the amplifier responses. So your amp models and your guitar speakers, the DSRs, are connected and can know about each other and behave in the correct way to give you the feel. SpeakerMix Pro as a whole, many different options, especially the room section with loading different rooms on every single channel or mixing to bus. So it's an extremely versatile mixing tool for guitar speaker tone, dedicated to guitar speaker tone. I didn't really cover the auto gain functions in the bottom right hand corner, auto 11, auto gain, but there's information on Celestion Plus and also other videos that we've made with Robbie Miller and Doug Doppler that you can check out to get a bit more in-depth information.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe. That was really interesting. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time spent doing that from your bedroom at home, and we hope that you, our invisible audience out there, enjoyed that as well and found something useful and entertaining about it. Thank you very much for whoever just said great presentation, Fred. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. If you have any questions about the product, or commercial questions, or questions about the functionality of the product, you can contact me, Ken Weller. I'm obviously listed as one of the participants on the website. So yeah, contact me on there directly, or you can email me directly at Celestion, which is ken.weller@celestion.com. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed our presentation, and any questions, just get in touch with us. And thanks very much, Joe, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.